You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. You wanted it, you got it. A radio program that helps teach you options trading inside and out, basic to complex. This is Options Bootcamp. Whether you want to learn how to protect your portfolio, generate income, or even become a master of volatility, the Options Bootcamp drill instructors will break it all down for you. Now, let's get you into peak options trading shape. Here are your Options Bootcamp drill instructors.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again. It is time to commence Education Wednesday. Yes, it is time for Options Bootcamp, the premier program for all you folks out there looking to learn a little bit about these options things. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, on the ever exciting Options Insider Radio Network. Remember, I know a lot of you enjoy the show on demand. First off, hey, if you just listened to Boot Camp, I know a lot of you like Boot Camp. Hey, I don't judge, but we also have a whole bunch of other shows that you're missing out on if you're just listening to Boot Camp. So make sure wherever you're listening to this, you upgrade to the full feed. You're going to get nearly a dozen shows coming at you, usually upwards of 2 a day, sometimes more. So we will come at you with all sorts of great options content. That is our promise to you. And of course, if you enjoy what you hear at the end of the day on the on-demand side, all we ask is that you rate and review it so new folks can continue to enjoy it. And of course, if you want more in your lives, that nearly a dozen shows not enough for you. You need even more. You want to get exclusive shows like our Pro Q&As, at a great one this week, as well as, of course, Options Oddities, where we dive into all the crazy trades we're putting on that we're seeing in the market, as well as, of course, get access to this live, like our live chatters right now. Yo, I see you, and then they're yo back to you, listeners. I love when they just say yo to me. It just cracks me up. But yes, you can join the cool kids in the live chat. So if you have questions, they just percolate to the top of your brain. You want to ask them as soon as you think them. I get it. You don't want to forget them. You want to bump yourself to the top of the line for all the questions, get the giveaways, all the other cool stuff that we do. theoptionsinsider.com/secret club. That's the place to go to begin that journey to the dark side. Trust me, I think you're going to have a good time once you're there. And let's see who's joining us. Is he a secret club, or I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out. He is the one, the only, Mr. Dan Passarelli, the founder of Market Taker Mentoring and the author of 1 or 2 or closing in on, I believe, 300 options-oriented tomes by now. He's a prolific author. Mr. P, welcome back to the program, sir. I like that. 300 books. You've been very busy.
Wow, yeah. I try and write at least one a day, so there's that. No weekends, though. I take weekends.
And these are, books, I should say, in air quotes, like 300 words. Not really a book, more of like a blog post. But hey, Dan calls them books, so we don't judge around here on Options Bootcamp. But you know what? You folks are allowed to judge when you head on over to your platform of choice and leave us a nice 5-star review. This week's one comes from GDZ. I like this, Dan. This is kind of getting to what I was just talking about, the 300 words. GDZ, he's brief, he's concise, he's pithy, he's right to the point. His review is listen, learn, repeat. 5 stars. I like that. It does kind of sum up the show in a very nice, succinct way, Dan. What do you think?
I like it. I like that a lot.
Uh-oh, I think Dan's going to try to borrow that for some of his marketing. I say dibs. I saw that first. So watch out, GDZ. We're not going to license you, but we will keep on rolling right on into the mail call.
Mail call. Time to look at questions submitted by our listeners.
All right. We got quite the backlog of questions coming at us these days. You know, I never imagined the Vol Bonanza would take up 3 shows the way it has now. And I have a feeling it might take up some of today's show as well, given some of your questions here. But it has been interesting. Clearly, it's top of mind for a lot of you folks out there. So I'm glad we could deliver you a nice, timely topic out there. But interesting stuff. Before we get into that, before we get into our poll question, all that fun stuff, Mr. Dan, I know when you're not talking to me, you're getting just bombarded with questions all the time over there at MTM, sir. And some of them are actually about options. So, and not just about your dubious style choices and everything else. So what are some of the interesting questions you've been bombarded with over there at MTM these days, sir?
You know, I get a lot of just, I get a lot of questions, you know, just like a broad array of topics. But, you know, sometimes I just get like these general questions like, man, I've been frustrated. You know, I've been trying this for years. Like, what to make this work? You know, just this general. It's kind of a mindset question, and you know, there's a few things. And one, when I say mindset, it literally is making up your mind that you want to do it. But you know, if I go down the list and maybe talk about some things that I haven't talked about in the past, I guess one, I would say patience. And it's a hard thing. It really is, because if you put on a trade and, you know, you just sort of leave it go, there's so many times when it just reverses and ends up not working. And so like you start to think, okay, I've really got to manage this more closely. I've got to take my profit sooner. And going too far on the other end of that spectrum, I think, can be a problem as well. Because if you're taking all your profits really, really small, like those black swans, or even just regular old swans that are kind of big, can erase too many of your winners. So it does require a little bit of patience, especially if you're trading in what I would call like the typical window for option traders, like between a 2 and 10 day holding period. The stock goes a little bit against you. I think it's important. I mean, depending on what type of trade you're making, I think it's important to sort of let it breathe a little bit, if you will.
Let it breathe. Well, we're not going to let your questions breathe, listeners, today. We're going to get into as many of them as we can today. Let's dive in first. Let's get your pulse on what's been going on out there in the world of options. Let's start with last week's question. We'll pay that off first. We asked you last week, listeners, you know, some people refuse to trade options on quote-unquote cheap stocks or underlyings. Are you in that camp? Or will you trade options on just about anything? Quite simply, what is your cutoff point where the stock becomes too cheap to trade options? Gave you 4 choices: below $15, below $10, below $5, or you have no limits because you're a savage. Mr. Dan, take a flying leap. Which one won, sir?
Yeah, I mean, if I were king, and I'd be a great king, by the way, I would say no limits. I am a savage.
Yes, our audience, clearly a bunch of savages. 41% choosing that. What surprised me was number 2. That was below $15, almost 27%. So over a quarter of our audience said they won't trade options on anything below $15. And then 41% says they're no limit savages. So we got to quite the dichotomy there, Mr. Dan. And then number 3 was below $5 with about 23%. And the one that I thought was maybe going to be the clear number 2 was the last place. It was about 9% for below $10. You know, $10 is usually a pretty long-standing cutoff point for a lot of people. But no, not our audience. It's either you're a no-limit savage or you stop at $15. There's no in between. So interesting stuff out there. This week's question, which you can play along with, listeners, as always, at options on your platform of choice. If you don't see it there, if it's not pinned there, then, of course, you can always scroll down a little bit. We do tweet out a lot of stuff, but we usually try to retweet it so you can still see it if you come in a little bit later. Just scroll down. You'll find the poll there. This week's question, you know, the recent VXX drama. We've been talking about that a little bit. Recent drama has focused the spotlight back on volatility product meltdowns. So we thought we'd ask you folks, which volatility product implosion or failure, just overall drama, had the greatest impact on the overall volatility market? Gave you 4 choices. The great neutering of SVXY that we talked about, that took place back in 2018. Also in 2018, we had the death of XIV, the inverse VIX product. In 2012, we had the TVIX. Call it disaster, call it unwinding, call it what you will. It became kind of like VXX is now, completely disassociated from its underlying. And that was weird because it wasn't driven by any sort of market dynamics. It was driven by poor product dynamics. They couldn't handle the fund flows they were receiving, and it kind of broke the product, which is infinitely more scary than if it's crazy markets break it. It's just a product breaking on its own. And then what's going on right now, the ongoing VXX drama right now, 2022. So 4 choices, Mr. Dan, if you have a vote for what is the most impactful on the overall vol market of these 4, have at it. And then B, more importantly, what do you think our audience is voting for?
I mean, I would put it personally at the death of XIV. I felt like that was a big deal that we're lucky it didn't become a little bit more systemic because it could. I think it could have, but I would call that one the biggest deal. Although, you know, some of these other things are they're all very important. But yeah, I'm going to go with death of XIV.
That's probably the way I would lean to. That was a very seminal moment in the vol space, and we still are dealing with many of the ramifications of that to many degrees. That is what our audience is going for as well, Dan. 65% right now choosing that, followed by a distant number 2, 20% for the ongoing VXX drama. And then number 3, the TVIX disaster. Easy for me to say, of 2012. And number 4, no love for the great SVXY neutering. Only 5% for that. So get out there if you've been intrigued by all this vol talk we've had on the show recently. Get in there, add options on Twitter. Make your voice heard. All right, let's get on out. Speaking of that vol drama, we got more questions along those lines. Let's go out to this one first from Substantive. I like that handle. Substantive says, can you do a quick rundown of the latest VXX drama and how it may impact the product? Dan, I'm not sure if you've been following the headlines of this one, but we just talked about this last week. And we were hoping on the show last week when we talked about, VXX effectively becoming a little bit disassociated from its underlying, that front month effectively VIX future and kind of trading more like a closed-end fund and subject to the whims and vagaries of the market. That was because Barclays had stopped issuing new shares for it. And so we were hoping for some clarity from Barclays, maybe even after our last show, about when they're planning to start issuing those again. So that could at least maybe give us some insight into when and if we can see VXX maybe resume some of its former trading patterns out there. Instead, Dan, what we didn't get clarification on that. Instead, we got more, as our listener puts it, drama. This coming out, I believe, on Monday of this week, all over the place. Financial Times, everybody talking about how Barclays was hit with nearly £500 million fine for issues stemming from what they did with VXX. And also, I should point out, not just VXX, also with their oil ETF, OIL. So they have 2 popular, actually not ETFs, these are obviously ETNs. We talked about that on the show last week, so bear that in mind. A distinction with a bit of a difference out there. And they were licensed, I should say, to issue $20.8 billion worth of notes. And instead, they decided to do almost double that. They issued an additional $15.2 billion worth of notes, well more than what they were registered for. Now, this didn't happen recently. This wasn't the reason why the product went crazy. This happened back in August of 2019. So there's a lot of fundamental questions as to A, why are we just figuring this out now? B, talk about when it rains, it pours. Just terrible timing for the folks at Barclays for this to come out now when VXX is already beset by problems. And then C, the guy who was the chief risk officer who should have directly overseen that back in 2019 is now the CEO. So it looks doubly damning for him. So yeah, unfortunately, Substantive and everybody else was curious. We didn't get any clarification or resolution to what's happening with VXX. Instead, we got more drama. How does this impact the product? Well, like I said, VXX is kind of trading on this weird whim cycle right now where we're seeing almost many short squeezes in it and panics and everything else. So this hit it for a little bit. People started going crazy with VXX again. Something was going to happen. It has settled down a little bit now. I don't think long-term there's any substantive changes to VXX from this. This is just more fuel to the fire that something is wrong over there at Barclays. And some folks who've been wondering if maybe this is going to lead to eventually the end of VXX, they're just going to take it off their books and say, you know what, this is not worth the hassle, because they don't make a ton of money at the end of the day from VXX, and for all the issues and headaches, I mean, £500 million on a fine here, that's going to leave a mark. So this may be more fuel to the fire that eventually you may see VXX go the way of the Dodo, perhaps sooner than Barclays would have planned to do so. Dan, what are your thoughts on this recent addition to the drama surrounding VXX? And as Substantive wants to know, you think it's going to have any long-term impacts on the product?
I mean, it's hard to say about the long-term impacts, but I mean, this is the criticism that I've had with volatility products from literally the beginning. I mean, people, like, we have retail people trading them and professionals, and like, this is not something, this is like a man-made disaster that somebody made the decision to create this scenario, which shouldn't come into play. I mean, I imagine somewhere in legalese in the prospectus it says, yeah, we might F up the valuation of this and just make it go crazy. Good luck using it to hedge. I'm sure it says that in a much more legalese sort of way somewhere. But like, why would anybody trade something where somebody can just, basically decide to inflate the price by withholding supply? It's just not a good product. And I've gone on record saying that, and everybody like wants to beat me up for saying that, but it's not a good product. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I trade it because it's not a good product. But I mean, this just creates it just creates a bad situation that should scare people away from trading it.
Are you getting death threats over VXX again, Dan? I told you not to wade into those waters. Dangerous folks slinging that VXX, Dan. They're going to get you down in Frankfurt. You better watch out.
I've had people complain. People are like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" But I mean, it's like, just imagine if like your option position, like, one day, like they just magically change the price of these calls that you have. Like
they did with SVXY, the great neutering of SVXY in 2018. That's why I put it on that list. That one to me is still outrageous for many other reasons, but yeah, doesn't top the list for me, but it's certainly up there. They just changed the game mid-cycle. Hey, what the hell? It's a half product now. Deal with it. Crazy, crazy time. But Dan, you better watch out. Maybe before you put on your underwear tomorrow, you better check it, because that polonium poisoning, that could pop up anywhere. You start talking smack about VXXer, they're going to send those polonium poisoning squads after you. So be careful down there.
It's a good thing I don't wear underwear, Mike.
Oh, well, there you go. Captain Commando. I should have remembered. All right. Let's keep rolling before things get even more uncomfortable. Let's get on out. Let's go to the land of the YouTubes. Don't get out there all that often, but a lot of people I know like to listen to the show and watch, in air quotes, the show on YouTube, including John Jeremy. I'm guessing his play may be a pun on the old Ron Jeremy, but John Jeremy says he listened to the most recent one we did, Everything You Want to Know About VIX, VXX, UVXY, and all that fun. He says, you should have all the links to all the This is strangely written. Okay. You should have the links to all the links/programs in your description or something, broski. It's my first video I'm watching. I just started listening, FYI. Well, John, welcome to the show. You are far from alone. A lot of new listeners tuning in all the time, including on YouTube. We welcome you. And yeah, I agree with you. We probably should do more on the YouTube front. Let you in on a little secret, broski, and everyone else who listens on YouTube, is that our YouTube stuff really goes out through an automated process. We post it in a lot of our other main podcast venues, and they take that and repurpose that for us onto YouTube. So we don't do a lot of manual posting up there. In fact, that makes it easy for us. If we had to do a lot of manual stuff, it'd be more laborious. But, you're right. We could do more with it, and that's something we are exploring and investigating, maybe making some native content for you YouTube folks, because there's a growing number of you out there who enjoy it on the old YouTube. So you are correct, John. We could do more, and I think we will be adding more to our YouTube content. So for all of you out there who like to consume your podcasts via YouTube, YouTube, an under-heralded podcast platform. It is growing out there. If you are intrigued, again, it kind of takes our content and it makes it effectively like a static image with the audio, which most people, when they quote unquote watch YouTube, they really listen to it anyway. So it's a great way for you to do that. But it's a good suggestion, John Jeremy. We appreciate it. And welcome to the fold, John. All right, moving out from YouTube, let's go to Stock Twits, where Ron is wrong. He was listening to episode 179, the one we just did with When Vol Products Go Crazy. And he just liked the show. He wanted to say, good episode, fellas. So there you go, Dan. Not everyone's trying to kill you. Ron here, he agrees with you and he thinks it was a good show, sir.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you so much, Ron.
So maybe you'll live another day from that polonium poisoning. You're good. You're good. Okay. We got some love coming in from Stock Twits. Let's go out to Twitter. You guys, again, can get at us anywhere. We're all over the place with this show. Twitter, we have Scott Storm. He actually usually listens on YouTube as well, but he came in on Twitter this time. He says, he's talking about the nanos, Dan. This is interesting. He says, I'm not sure the brokers are charging proper fees that go with single multiplier options, and the quoted spreads aren't helping either. So he's talking about I suppose the quote-unquote launch of the nanos, which was supposed to happen back on March 14th. I haven't really seen hide nor hear of them. I haven't really done much looking, to be honest, either, but I usually leave it to our audience. If things are interesting out there, they will hit us up, or if they are intrigued by these things. And, outside of Scott, no one's really said hide nor hear of these things, which is usually not a good sign for public interest. I'm curious for you, Dan, have you had any of your mentees come to you with questions about these? And have you had a chance to look at them in the wild and have any maybe updated thoughts on the nanos, including maybe the fact that he thinks the spreads aren't good? So I'm assuming he thinks they're charging too high of a spread or too high of a fee for a single multiplier option. And also that the spreads are wide, which, if you'll recall, in fact, if you listened to the episode I did with SIBO last year when they announced these things, I asked them those exact two questions. I said, hey, the problems we've seen in the past with these smaller size contracts are the fees are too high and the spreads are garbage. And they say, we understand that. We're planning for that. So they told me they were ready to roll with that. Mr. Dan, do you have any updated thoughts on the nanos, sir?
Well, I don't know if I should be embarrassed for not knowing they launched, or if maybe the CBOE should be embarrassed for me not knowing they launched, or did they launch, or what? Like, I don't know. Hold on a second. Like, I'm literally Googling it. March 14th. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, did they launch it? If they did, geez Louise.
Don't feel bad, because I had the same thought when this question first came in. I was like, did they actually launch? I haven't seen anything about these things. So, yeah it's a valid question. I don't mock you the way others in BXX land do, Dan. But I won't poison your underwear. But, yeah, I think the fact that you have heard nothing really about these things, I have heard nothing, is not exactly a sign that they're lighting the world on fire. I know the intended date was March 14th. I'm going to have to go look. Now you're going to make me do some digging here, Dan, to see if these things are actually listed. Let me look really quickly, because, there's 8 bazillion chains here for SPX. And these are, of course, the initial nanos listeners are going to be on the SPX. I don't see them here. But yeah, I'll need to dig a little more, because there are obviously multiple listings for SPX, and there are some ones that look like they could fit the bill, but these could just be weekly expert. I have to go digging, because they obviously don't list a multiplier right here. I'll have to go dig. So this is a good question, Scott. Sounds like you saw them, so maybe you had some experience. Have you, listeners, have you traded any of these things, these mysterious nanos that were supposed to launch on March 14th, and neither Dan nor I have really seen hide nor hear of these things? If you have tales of them, if you've encountered them in the wild and your thoughts on them, hit us up, let us know. We'd love to hear your unsolicited feedback, or perhaps I did just solicit it, but outside of that, your feedback on all these things, because we're very curious what you think. But yeah, it's an inauspicious beginning if they have indeed launched, to put it mildly. All right, let's go back to Vol. You folks are Vol hungry these days. This comes from Donas. He says, hello, drill instructors. Well, hello, Donas. Because I'm a newer listener and trader, and I'm loving your show. Well, thank you. We love all of you folks out there. However you consume the show, we love you all. He says, it's amazing to realize all the things that I still don't know about options, but I'm learning more every week. Well, that's what we're here for, Donas. Don't get overwhelmed. Take it easy. Take it slow. You'll get there. Don't worry. Don't sit there. Oh my God, I don't understand everything about options. I can never touch these things. That's how you just overwhelm yourself with fear and worry and regret. So take it slow, take it easy. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You will get there. He says, I thought your recent episodes on volatility were very informative. Well, thank you. Because as a European, one vol product that wasn't on your episode was VStocks. Do you have any thoughts on that product? And do you trade it yourselves? Yeah, I guess that shows how jam-packed our vol episodes were, because we didn't even really have time to get to international flavors of volatility. Another reason we didn't get to them, Donas, is that there aren't really that many, nor are they really huge trading vehicles. I mean, outside of the US, when it comes to straight up vol products, equity vol, you're looking at really two. You got the VStocks over there in Europe, and you have the Nifty VIX, which is really one of the only international licensing endeavors of VIX that has been successful. And that's overseas in India. But then VStocks, now you have a little bit more grist for the mill. VStocks does trade. It is based on the Eurostoxx 50 index. So listeners, you know how VIX is derived from the S&P 500, the SPX. VStocks is derived from the Eurostoxx 50. So a different, smaller Eurocentric index, but it's the same type of process. I love the description of this. Comes straight from the VStocks website itself. It says the VStocks indices are based on Eurostoxx 50 real-time options prices and are designed to reflect the market expectations of near-term up to long-term volatility by measuring the square root of the implied variance across all options of a given time to expiration. Well, Dan, if that is not the most succinct and well-crafted definition of a vol product I've ever heard, Dan, I don't know what is. Let me say that again. The market expectations of near-term up to long-term volatility by measuring the square root of the implied variance across all options of a given time to expiration. I've seen many different product issuers try to describe their products with marketing lingo. I've never heard anyone talk about try to sell the square root of the variance before. Leave it to the Europeans to think that's a marketing slogan, Dan.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they need to talk to a marketer. If you want to have greater volume and to have a healthy, robust ecosystem of a market, you need to have retail people trading it. And a retail person is going to read this and they're going to run in the opposite direction.
Yeah, that's kind of the knock on VStocks, listeners, because right now you might be intrigued by a product like VStocks. It's like VIX, but more Eurocentric. And hey, where's all the vol coming from right now? It's coming from Europe. So that's a good time to maybe have some exposure to VStocks. The problem is it doesn't really trade like VIX. It does a pale shadow of the volume out there and the liquidity. Part of the reason is because they market to people like this. That's probably one of the reasons why VStocks hasn't really caught on with the masses. It doesn't have a catchy moniker like the VIX does either, like the Fair Gauge. But right now, a product like VStocks should be lighting it up. That's where a lot of people should be trading, and most people don't even know it exists. So the short answer to your question, Donas, is that yes, we do know about VStocks. It does exist. My thoughts on the product are like what Dan said, doesn't really trade a heck of a lot, so I can't really recommend it for a lot of our audience out there. You got to be pretty savvy. Do I trade it myself? No, I don't really trade VStocks for all the problems or the issues really I just laid out. It's really only exciting around times like now when there's something going on in Europe. In fact, the last time we got a lot of interest in VStocks was when Putin invaded Crimea in 2014. So it flares up every now and then. Other than that, people tend to stick to VIX for a variety of reasons and some of the other domestic offerings that we discussed on the show last time. So it's an interesting product. I would love to see it blow the doors off and trade a lot more. It's better for everyone to have a even more vibrant volatility ecosystem. It's up to those folks over there about, banging the drum a little bit more about VStocks that, hey, it's out here. It's a different but related flavor of VIX, and you could use it in certain scenarios like right now. All right, let's go on to this one. This is a return offender, Dan. This is Theta Noob. I remember this handle. Theta, he sent in a question, and we answered it on the show. He wrote in to say, I appreciate the surprise feature on your recent episode of OBC. Thanks for your new name. Oh, I said you're not a Theta Noob. You're a Theta Pro because you wrote into a show like this. I recall that now. He says, thanks for the new name, but I have yet to deserve the title of Theta Pro. However, when this tracked trading journal, I guess he has a journal, reaches 1 million, then I will accept the title. Next level is 15,000. And then he's going to call himself the Theta Enthusiast. So there you go, Dan. Theta Noob was very thankful for our help. He says he's not quite a pro yet. When he gets to 15 grand, he'll be a Theta Enthusiast. Then when he gets to all the way to 1 million, then he's Theta Pro, Dan. What do you say?
I love it. Yeah, we've got, a tier rated system. I love it. I love it.
You're harvesting a lot of Theta if you get into 1 million from 15 grand. So well done to you then. Keep fighting the good fight out there. Let us know what you're doing to harvest some of that old Theta. I'd be curious. All right, we got time for a couple more here. I love you listeners, so we'll squeeze in as many as we can. Let's go to this one. Dan, this is right up your alley about the Greeks. This comes from Mr. Nixit. He says, everyone talks about delta as the probability of an option expiring in the money. But most people don't care if the option expires there, but instead if it touches the strike during the life of the option. That's when rolls and other types of adjustments are normally triggered. Do you guys have any thoughts on people maybe focusing on the wrong things when it comes to delta and expiration? Well, Mr. Nick said, I hope you listened to our recent episodes on delta because we dove right into this kind of topic. But Mr. Dan, we touched on this on those episodes. Do you have any further thoughts for Mr. Nixit on maybe people conflating delta being held to expiration versus delta of just touching the strike and maybe the utility of one versus the other, sir?
Yeah. So, I talk about this a lot. The expiring in the money thing is just like a nice little eyeball rule of thumb, which I guess you can use occasionally if you're feeling, saucy. But here's the thing. It's not mathematically accurate. Okay. Everybody uses it that way. And we talked about that on one of our last shows, like, hey, what's the delta you going to Joe's party tomorrow night? Like option traders, that's in their vernacular. But we all know that it's not really mathematically accurate. And neither is the probability of it touching the strike. And even if these things were mathematically accurate, the options pricing model guarantees that if you're an income trader, selling any one given strike is not any better than selling one other given strike. Like that's why, if you believe that as an income trader, I'm just going to assume maybe we're talking about that, hey, if I always sold a 20 delta option or 30 delta or 10 delta, whatever the number is for you, if you believe that that's true, you don't believe in the options pricing model. Like you don't believe in all the math that all the financial engineers have spent like lifetimes of getting like Nobel Prizes and such for. It's just not an accurate thing. So, just take that with a grain of salt, keep it in your vernacular to sound cool when you're talking to your other option trader friends, but you can't really use it. If you do, you're going to be doing yourself a disservice.
All right, Mr. Dan, we'll get out of here on this one. This one comes from Nino Concilio. I like that name. This one brought a smile to my face because it's just you'll see, Dan, when I read it. Nino says, by far, the roll call section on Options Bootcamp episode 7. Yes, episode 7 was the worst by far. I understand as a securities professional, you're limited on what you can say. But having a guest just read from paper script takes out the entertainment. Otherwise, a well-done podcast. I had to read this 3 times to see what the heck he was talking about. But yes, he is writing to us right now, Dan, in the year of our Lord 2022 to complain about episode 7, in particular, the roll call segment of episode 7, which I went and looked it up, came out on September 12th of 2012, Dan. Wow. So by all means, tell me your burning recollections of that roll call segment from episode 7, sir. Have at it.
Oh, that was my 73rd favorite episode. I can't believe, what is this guy even talking about? Dude, hey, you know what? We can kind of bash him because it's going to take him about 5 years to see this episode.
Yeah, he's a little behind. On the one hand, you got to say what? On the other hand, it is nice. I do know a lot of people are starting from scratch. We did say in the top episodes of last year, episode 1 was up there, was number 1, I believe. So people are going back, so they are encountering this. So Nino, we're giving you a hard time, but we're really just having fun. The truth is, that's a decade ago for Dan and I. And I've done, I don't know, a couple of 1,000 episodes of different shows since then. So off the top of my head, my recall of the roll call segment of episode 7 is kind of low. But if you say it wasn't up to your snuff, then I'm okay with that. If you said the rest of the episode was great, that's awesome. You know, I know a lot of you are coming back into boot camp and starting from the beginning. So that's something I have been talking with our team with about. Maybe we should go back. Because like I said, this show's been around for a while. Going back and maybe remastering some of those old episodes for you. Who knows? Maybe we'll go and hear that section and realize maybe that section isn't up to snuff. We started this show way back in the day with Zecco. Doesn't even exist anymore as a broker. And actually, then it moved on into other firms. And so, yeah, it was Sogo Trade for a while. So, yeah, a lot of those firms are not even around anymore that were on the show back in the earliest days. So we could go back and maybe remaster it a little bit for us. Maybe, Nino, if we don't have enough to do around here, we'll take that under consideration. But we're giving you a hard time. When you hear this in about a half a decade, as Dan says, don't take offense. We do appreciate all you listeners. It just struck me as funny that we're getting, with all the shows we're doing all the time now, we're getting a complaint about a show from a decade ago. But hey, we're down for it. We can handle it. We love you all, no matter when you're listening to our episodes, in whatever decade you're enjoying them. All right, everybody. That's going to do it for us. Although, Dan, I do have to say, before we go, I do have problems with the third segment of that webinar you did in 2014 about precious metals. I'm still bothered by that, sir.
Oh, yeah. I screwed that one up 6 ways to Sunday. I can't believe it.
I can't believe you still have that up on your serve. Take that down immediately.
Yeah, I remember everything I've ever said on every single podcast, radio show, TV interview, webinar. Oh my God.
It's like someone in COVID, they go to Netflix and they discover a show from a decade ago, and they're like, oh, it's new to them, so it's all hot and fresh. But for everybody else, they watched that show when it came out, And so it's like, oh, I guess that I remember that episode, But hey, we love all you new folks out here. Again, I've said it many times. There are many new folks discovering the shows and consuming it in many interesting and new ways, including YouTube or going back to the archives on whatever platform you're getting it on. So keep listening, Nino, and let us know if you sounds like you're liking the show otherwise, so we're glad to hear it. And Mr. Dan, if folks like Nino want to reach out to you, maybe they have long simmering complaints of their own, maybe they just want to send you some love like a lot of our listeners did today, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, you are always welcome, but I do want to note that we do have a 3-year statute of limitation on complaining about anything. You
will accept no complaints before 2019. That's it. You cut off for complete, like the IRS. 3 years and can't go any farther back.
Yeah, so, hey, make your way on over to markettaker.com and hit me up. Join our chat room for free. It's free for a temporary amount of time, and we love to chat in there and share trade ideas. And you are welcome because you are a boot camp listener.
And don't you have a cool new retreat coming, sir?
We do, and actually, if you click join now on our website, we're going to invite you to a webinar next week where we're talking about our retreat and what it's all about. And we'd love to have you come and rub elbows in person in Sonoma, California.
That's another thing. That retreat you did in 2009, just the worst. I'm still angry about that one, Dan. So what are you going to do for me?
My first one was in 2012. So there.
Oh, that was somebody else's retreat. So there you go. That was the same year. He's listening. So obviously he might take issue with that retreat too. So watch out. In the meantime, markettaker.com. 2 T's. Don't forget the second T. That's for Theta. All you Theta noobs out there looking to become Theta pros and make your million like our listener there have added. Of course, if you want more education in your lives, listeners, stay tuned on the on-demand side. If you're listening to the full network, you will get Options Playbook Radio right after this episode. So if you're done with this, just hit next on whatever device you're listening on. You'll have Brian and OPR live to tape in your ear holes there. And then we'll be back, of course, tomorrow with a two-parter yet again. We got This Week in Futures Options as well as episode 2 of the Option Block Friday. Got volatility views. And for all you cool kids in the secret club, you get options oddities to round out your week. Then we're back again next week all the way through to another Education Wednesday, another episode of Options Boot Camp. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.